Okay, folks, we're going right into it, no editing, and in the spirit of concision, the creative constraint of being under a duvet with limited oxygen forces me to speak succinctly and get to the fucking point. So let's go. Some of these topics are not current. I don't think we want to talk about the plane crash. I read somewhere a professional said, if you don't know what you're talking about, keep your mouth shut. I respect that. But let's talk about tariffs. According to Stephen Marin, he's the nominee for the chair of Council of Economic Advisors. He is opining a 20% optimal tariff, and to combat the threat of retaliation, there would be a military component of not defending that country that retaliates economically. There are also ideas proposed for a user fee of treasury debt. As you know, we use that dollar in the world of debt structuring, and so the prominence of the U.S. dollar is paramount. In the 2018 tariffs, China shifted trade, and nearshoring to Mexico was a common thing, and we eat 6 times more avocados now than we did in the 1990s. 10% were imported. With NAFTA, 90% of avocados are imported. So with these tariffs today on Mexico and Canada, we're looking at maybe some expensive gas and oil from Canada. I think 60% is imported from Canada, 90% of these avocados. Okay, I don't fucking care about the avocados. Just do salsa for 4 years, okay? Let's talk about the fire. These Bombardier, is it a French word? Who is this company? I think it's Canadian. CL415s. These are super scoopers. 1,600 gallons, okay? They pick up the salt water. Pretty phenomenal. So a gallon is, 8 pounds? And so this is like 1,300 pounds of water that they're scooping and dropping. And then it's not really effective as much as like a foam deterrent or a retardant because the water evaporates when they drop on it. But going back to this fire, before 1800, there were 4.5 million acres burned every year. Juan Cabrillo, this is a guy who discovered much of California. 1542, he noticed these Santa Ana winds and the smoke, okay? He named San Pedro Bay the Bay of Smokes. So 1542, this is not a new phenomenon, these winds and fires. 2020 was a high of 4.3 million acres, up from an average of 250,000 a year. So there was a decline, and since 1980, harvested timber from public lands has declined by 75%. So you'll see this with this new interior. Doug Bergman, I believe, he's probably opening up to gas and oil and probably some timber, which these private landowners do so sufficiently, sustainably, and all that. So we don't need to import all our timber from Canada. Let's move on to fire insurance. A lot of talk in California on price controls, which were distorting risk markets and preventing companies from appropriately pricing risk. Insurance, should be costly in high-risk areas. Water would be too expensive to afford 5 gallons of water to produce a walnut. Okay, water would be expensive if valued properly. So you have to value risk, you have to value water, and insurers need to fully price in that risk and insurance costs. So the FAIR Plan had 450,000 policies as of September. This was up 40%, significant, and 1,400 in the Pacific Palisades. Individual coverage cap is $3 million. But the new law finally allowed insurers to bill customers 50% of the first billing for bailing out the FAIR Plan through a special assessment. So they can basically tap into their reinsurance to pay this assessment. But the FAIR Plan, I think it was like $200 million cash on hand, $2.5 billion in reinsurance available, and then estimated losses $30 billion. $6 billion attributable to the FAIR Plan. So significantly under-resourced, and you'll probably see some increases across the state. in your insurance. So the FAIR plan was set up in the 1960s. This was back when the Watts riots led to widespread fire damage in LA. And it needed a 70% increase to cover costs. It was only approved for 16%. I think this is recently, actually. But this 1945 McCarran-Ferguson Act enshrined state regulatory authority over insurance. So this is a little bit about the insurance market, which is just interesting how there's like insurance on insurance, and the risk gets distributed or socialized, actually. And these fire departments, firefighters are making $200,000 plus $90,000 in benefits. They can retire at 55 with pensions, 90% of their final salaries. So LA spent $350 million in the year on pensions and benefits, and fire prevention was only 5% of their budget. And then you've heard a little bit about this reservoir, the Santa Ynez. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but 117 million gallons was offline. So, there was some rumors, maybe they're true, maybe they're not, and I guess there's some federal control over water movement. I haven't delved into that as much. Okay, the last topic, entrepreneurship and jobs, AI. Obviously seen this AI phenomenon out of China. DeepSeek is, 5 million of compute versus a billion. I don't know about these dollar estimates, but basically creative constraint. You give a bunch of dorks a lot of compute and you don't give them a lot of money, they'll figure it out, especially in China. But this new book is called Make Your Own Job, How the Entrepreneurial Work Ethic Exhausted America by Eric Baker. And he talks a little bit about, I haven't read this book, but it was just an article about the book, about this cult of, do what you're passionate about and create this brand of yourself. And these kind of inane expressions on LinkedIn. There's a great skit of these guys having a bunch of beers, and they're speaking in LinkedIn lingo, which is basically, a very innocuous, polite way of self-promotion and just complete bullshit. So that's it. I'm running out of breath because I'm under a duvet. I use the duvet as a means of suppression of sound. And so we talked about tariffs. We talked about the California fire. We did not talk about the Potomac airplane crash. We talked about fire insurance, and we talked about fire departments, and we talked about entrepreneurship and AI. I think AI is going to threaten jobs, but that's why I'm doing this podcast, because we still need some idiots out there. We can't just have boring AI doing everything. We need some human idiots. So here you go, the human idiot on a weekly basis. We'll see you next week.